This is Sean Marie Higgins with another episode of Spirit Call Out, where I bring you messages from Spirit. So Spirit comes to me to find their living in body loved ones. And I share them on this podcast called Spirit Call Out. Today, I have for you a spirit that initially came to me a little more than a year ago. I would say the spring or summer of 2024. And the reason I like to say when the spirit comes to me is because this may correlate with the person to who this message is for. It may correlate with the passing of that person, of the spirit who's coming forward, and or it may correlate with some event that occurred that reminded you of this loved one who's crossed over, or something may have coincided at that time that the spirit actually came forward. And again, this was spring or summer 2024, could have been late summer, early fall. One of the things we're going to talk about at the end is the on off button for spirit, what happens when we turn it off, and why we would turn it off and have more control over our contact with spirit. This particular spirit came forward to me early in the morning, just as I was getting out of bed, like a lot of the other spirit callouts that come to me. They come first thing in the morning, just when I'm starting to sit up to get out of bed, before I have time to start thinking about my day. And then I have to lay back down in bed and receive their messages. This spirit came, and I first heard the words very clearly: my son, my son, my son. And this was a Black man's voice. I could tell by the voice. And then very, very slowly fading in. But I wouldn't even say that it was an inner vision. It was a telepathic kind of vision. And it's very difficult for me to explain. In previous lessons, I've explained the difference between the visual field in the physical world versus in the inner world, where you see something in the spiritual world. But this was neither. This was a telepathic vision. I saw the left profile of this spirit, and he was a Black man in about his 50s. He had freckles. He was saying the words, my son, my son, my son. He wants to reach his son. And he showed me his son. I saw him sending energy to his son. His son I saw as a field of energy. And within that field of energy, I saw a very faint and nonspecific male adult. That indicates to me that this son of his is still in living body. I got the feeling that this man passed away quite suddenly, or not in the presence of his son, and felt, for some reason, he feels that he needs to communicate with his son, and he's trying very hard to send energy to his son. Now, let me show you the picture that I drew. And again, these are very rough sketches, of course, because I'm not an artist. I claim no such skill. It was very difficult for me to get the features of this man's face exactly how I saw them. So I'm going to tell you, the first person I thought of when I saw this man's profile was Morgan Freeman, at about the age, or a little younger than the age he was in the movie Shawshank Redemption. He was a lighter skinned Black man. He had freckles, large freckles on his cheeks. And he was wearing a beige knit sweater, and I saw just the collar of it and a wooden button on either the very top part of the shirt or the collar. And that's something that he highlighted more and more as I began communicating with him. As I've discussed previously, spirit will introduce themselves to me as a moment or a few moments of words, pictures, visions, feelings, telepathy, etc. And then at a later time, I go back and connect with the spirit and get more information. So at the time, this is the information that I got quickly, probably over a couple of minutes. And then at a later time, I sat and I got more information from this man. It's interesting because when I did that, I was connecting with the spirit and writing down things he was telling me. And I didn't know that I was writing this until after that session was over. And I looked down at my paper and I had written the phrase Native American. I don't know what that is referring to, but it was written on my paper. I don't remember writing it. I don't remember him saying it, but it was written on my paper. So that may be some reference that's identifying to the living in body human that he is wanting to connect with, which is his son. So, some other things here to note. In the picture, you'll see that he was sending energy. I drew waves of energy from his mouth, from his consciousness to his son. And I feel as though he was showing me these waves of energy to show that he was trying very hard to communicate with his son. And this is going to not only help him move on to a more peaceful state, but to also feel closure and that his son knows he's okay and that he's loved and that he's still here for his son. And I feel that this will give his son some closure, knowing that his father is still with him, has no hard feelings about anything, just love. Now, the energy that came from this man is that he was a dad. I was shown the knit sweater. It was beige. And then I got more of an image of his whole body. He was a trim man. He reminded me of the kind of dad on the Bill Cosby show. He was showing me the knit sweater as to show me that he dressed nicely. He was very responsible. He was someone that most people would think of as a really good, reliable person and a very good father. And the message he wants to give again is that he is still here and very much wants to communicate with his son. His hair was very short, down to the scalp, black, and he had a full head of hair. He was not bald. And I tried to portray that in the image. The overriding message that I got, his very strong desire to communicate with his son. And this was on a morning that I had received about 5 or 6 other spirits lined up to also give me messages. And during this time, I was becoming very overwhelmed with the amount of spirit, with the number of spirits trying to contact me on a daily basis. And they all seemed to have messages for people other than me. And this is when I sought help from my spiritual mentor. I learned how to control when and how intense and for how long the spiritual doorway was open. I learned how to stop the free influx of spirits, one after the other, because I could not keep up with their requests. Why would we want to limit our communication with spirit? Because with all of those spiritual entities wanting to come forward in goodwill to communicate with their living and body loved ones, a lot of other spirit activity comes in everywhere. It was sort of untethered spirit activity that happened everywhere, including within my house and with manners that were not so pleasant. They were sporadic, intrusive in my understanding of them, although they may not have been intended that way. They would just sort of appear during times that were inconvenient or during times that would be scary for me, like at night. I would hear spirits when I was trying to go to sleep. I would hear them walking around my room or rubbing on the walls. I was hearing things being put down very heavily on my nightstand beside my bed, or some things getting shaken right beside my bed while I was trying to go to sleep. And they would either wake me up just as I was falling asleep, or I couldn't even get to sleep. And some of these spirits were not necessarily beneficial. Not all of them would actually come forward with messages. They would just be acting a lot around me. And I don't know that I would necessarily choose to communicate with all of these spirits who were hanging around. They were just there, possibly wanting help. I know some of them were, but I'm not sure that all of them were. And because I wasn't sure, I felt that it was something that I couldn't control, that it was a communication that I was not able to say, no, I don't want to be in this communication right now. And so that was one of the reasons why I needed to stop the influx of this intense spiritual communication. Another reason I wanted to stop it is because getting too many spirits would stop me from getting enough meaningful information from one or two. Instead of getting 6 or 10, I would slow it down to 1 or 2 and spend the time to get meaningful, deep, quality information that I could translate to someone else for a meaningful purpose and actually do some good. So initially, I was open to everything without a filter. I wasn't really taking deliberate control in harnessing my power of spiritual communication as a meaningful skill. Again, at the same time, I knew that I could naturally see spirits for a reason. Some of them wanted my help, and I sincerely wanted to help them. So asking for what they want is another part of this process, and that's something else that we'll go over in another episode. But first, we have to learn how to control our engagement with the spirit world because it does interfere with our ability to function in the physical world. Another reason we would want to hone this down a little bit is because it's more respectful that way. It's more responsible, it's more respectful, it's more intelligent. If we try to take on more than we can handle, then we end up getting many spirits giving us a tiny bit of information each, but not enough to do anything with. I'd rather get a lot of information from 1 or 2 spirits that's meaningful and can be delivered. And this way, I can act as a true bridge between the non-physical and physical worlds. I can actually help spirits and humans in a way that very few human beings on this earth at this time can. Out of all the languages in the world, this is the least spoken among humankind. There are only relatively a few of us who speak this language, who are also willing, deliberately willing to translate it publicly in order to serve in a way that paves the sacred path to cross that bridge between body forms. In this case, it is between physical, materialized human body form and etheric spirit form. Consciousness and body form align with each other. So naturally, a physical body comes with a more physical and rigid consciousness. A spiritual body naturally comes with a more open, infinite possibility type of quality to thinking and belief systems. What we do when we communicate with spirit, or even when we receive messages from spirit from others who are mediums, we're merging these two consciousnesses as we merge the communication between the two beings. This changes your biology. Once you are touched with the words from spirit in a way that you have no doubt about it, it changes you forever. It changes your consciousness forever. Even if you used a medium, just becoming aware without doubt of the existence of the non-physical dimensions and that life forms exist within them, want to and are trying to communicate with you for your well-being, changes your mind and it changes your consciousness forever. Once that occurs, get ready to start being the medium yourself, at least to some degree, or to the degree that you wish. You always have control over the experience. And this is why I teach courses on this topic, because there's so much to learn. You have so much more ability and power than you realize, and it can begin with the awareness of the existence of spiritual realms within which other forms of beings exist and love us through dimension. We have the ability to communicate between dimensions. Just recognizing that without doubt changes your biology. And because our form, and for us, that's physical biology, aligns with our consciousness, when we become aware that there are spiritual realms and that our loved ones that have crossed over are still here, without doubt, when we become aware of that, it changes our consciousness, which then changes our biology to become more healthy, to become more open, to become more pliable, flexible, resilient, because our consciousness just opened to the presence and belief in spirits who can talk to us through telepathy. That's an infinite potential right there. When we believe that and become aware of it without doubt, our biology follows that in its ability to heal itself. Immune system is enhanced. Anti-inflammatory cascades of cytochemical reactions are enhanced. Emotional resilience and positivity is enhanced. Belief in more possibility of things coming to us in our lives is enhanced. And thus, things do start to open up and happen more positively for us with relationships, with jobs, with careers, with feeling happier, with realizing what our desires are and who we are and what our purpose is. It all harmonizes together in a gentle way that will integrate with each life individually for the most pleasant way for each one of us. All right, so let's go back to that on-off switch. So mostly for me, it was the activity in my house that was bothering me. That's why I knew I needed this on-off switch to start working. Now that I knew about it, I needed to learn how to access it and work with it so that I could be more in control of when I was communicating with spirit. And I could turn the sign to say closed for business for now, reassuring spirit that I would then be open again at these certain times of day. Some very bizarre electrical activity began again. When I told any spirits that were not here for my highest value to leave, immediately a certain light in my living room would burn out. Immediately, it would just pop out, even if I had just changed the light bulb. And whenever I would talk about that happening, the light bulb would pop out again. So there were certain electrical places in the house, lights and appliances through which the spirits were working. And it was scaring me and I didn't like it. And it was expensive because the light bulbs that I use are full spectrum and they cost a lot of money. So I was starting to say, if you're going to reimburse me for these light bulbs, then you can blow them out. But until then, stop blowing out my light bulbs. I want peace in my house. And once I started taking ownership of my own home, my own space, however, with respect and with love, I got exactly what I asked for. And we're going to go over in another episode, cleansing and clearing practices, how to do that and when to do that. Now, the first thing that happened to me when I found my off switch was that all of my spiritual communication stopped completely. I stopped receiving all spirits coming to me in the mornings. Now, I still always communicate with my highest guide for book writing, class creations, and with my clients and patients as a medium. However, the spirits that were lining up to come see me in the mornings completely stopped. All the electrical activity and the bizarre happenings in my house almost completely stopped. But it was a striking difference. And at first I was worried. I thought, oh no, I've lost my gift. I did something and I lost my gift. Be careful what you ask for. I didn't want the morning spirits to stop coming to me because I wanted to help the spirits. But at first it did stop. And I realized it's because I needed a break. I needed a break from all of it because I needed a clean slate. Now, when this happens, we slow down and organize spirits who are able to come to us. Not only did I cleanse and clear my space and my body and my being, but I also very firmly, vocally affirmed how many spirits I would see and talk to for the spirit call out every morning. And that was 1, 2, or 3. I really prefer to get only 1 or 2 in the mornings. But at first, it all stopped. But having a clean slate allowed me to reopen to spirit deliberately. So what I then had to do was deliberately do a practice of opening to spirit. I couldn't just say, that's it, only 2 spirits can come. What I had to do was shut it down, take a break, and then create my own practice of opening my doorway to spirit. It's just like somebody wanting to come over to your house. They're not going to be able to get in unless you get up, you open the door and let them in. And they're probably not going to come over unless you set up a time or visit. So this is the work that we now have to do when we want to be responsible and get clear, quality, meaningful information from spirit. We have to work harder. We have to learn how to open deliberately and then allow the time for spirit to approach, because we have defined the spirits, the quality of spirits that we are allowing in. I only allow in spirit that has a sincere, authentic desire of high value to communicate to a living and body loved one or other being through me. It has to be of high value, out of love, out of goodwill, authenticity, kindness, and goodness. Otherwise, they're not allowed. They can't just come through for entertainment or to have someone to talk to or to watch me freak out because the lights are turning on or off. And some of them I got kind of the feeling they were just, wanting to hang out with someone. And I understand the need for that. But what I do during my cleansing is I move those spirits on to Mother Earth to rehome them with other beings that are able to give them that and to help them move on for their highest value and well being. Even if they were bothering me, I still would help them move on to a place where they could fulfill what it is that they wanted without interfering with my physical life. So we have to work harder when we turn our on off button, when we control this kind of communication. So I learned how to do an opening, a physical step by step approach to go within and reopen the doorway to spirit. And then when I just wait and allow, spirit comes through. And this is a much more peaceful, meaningful quality of communication. So when you do find this off switch, if you're one of those mediums or people who do encounter lots of spirit activity, that might be one of the things that you encounter at first, but don't fret. You're just getting a clean slate and you're being asked to now learn your opening, come up with your opening process to allow spirit through. Doing this takes more work, but I'm happy to do it because it shows my respect for spirit. Now, once in a while, I still get things coming through sporadically. Electrical activity will still, once in a while sporadically come through. I know that I need to do a cleansing because I'm naturally open. So I have to naturally cleanse. Just like if we don't want to smell, we have to shower regularly. If we want to stay in shape, we have to go to the gym regularly. If we want to stay healthy, we have to continue to eat healthy food. And having a relationship with spirit is just like having a relationship with a living and body loved one. We have to cultivate that relationship. We have to continue to visit spirit. We have to be mindful and polite and respectful. We have to do the work of opening the door for them to come in, just like we would have to do the work of going to a friend's house, driving there, setting the time, and arriving, knocking at the door or ringing the doorbell, and they are letting us in. So I treat it like that. And for me, it works so much more peacefully in my life. And having those steps gives me a buffer. It allows my consciousness to gradually become aligned with that of the spirit realms. I can now mindfully and willingly create my own step by step process where I can approach spirit gradually. This is a very empowering skill to have. And we're going to talk more about that in future episodes. So if you're listening to this on an audio only podcast, it also streams on YouTube where you can go to see the pictures or sketches that I drew. I think that seeing these pictures may be very pivotal for those who actually are the recipients of these spirits coming through. And you may actually learn something from looking at my pictures. For example, this one where I put labels, the spirit highlighted the beige knit sweater and the button on the sweater. These give an quality to the type or character of person who would wear such a thing, and or it may be identifying to the person he is trying to reach. Okay, well, thank you so much for listening to Spirit Call Out with Dr. Sean Marie Higgins. I am wishing you all many loving interactions with your spirit loved ones. And until next time, namaste.